Thank you, Nicole. Always a pleasure, Nicole. Thanks for hosting. And welcome, rap friends, for coming here today. It's a Thursday, feels like a Friday, but thank you for spending your time with us again. Dr. Giani is here to teach us all another lesson. And I know you all saw the subject line for today is reasoning with renegades. And you might have seen the top line of talking about civil rights. You don't have to huff and puff and be like, oh my goodness, it's another civil rights lecture. It's not just that, my friends. When we talk about civil rights, we're not, of course, there are different sections of civil rights. And yes, race is very much a prevalent topic that's always talked about when you talk about civil rights, but civil rights is not just a race thing, it's an everybody thing. And Gianni is going to tell us how another section or demographic of our population with people with disabilities intersects with civil rights. So I'm very interested to hear what you have to say, Gianni, as always. And we have our fearless president, John Wells, here to ask the questions we always want to ask, and Gianni to give us the answer. So I will let you all take it from here.
Awesome. Hey, Carla, thank you so much. And John, it's always great to have these great conversations with you. Of course, I'm laughing about Guess the Sample. I recently did a lesson with my class where we did the trial of the Sugar Hill Gang. Does the Sugar Hill Gang actually owe Chic a little bit more money, and of course Grandmaster Cass money for lyrics that were taken? So I'm absolutely loving this era, of course, celebrating the history of hip hop. And hip hop, of course, I say is civil rights music because of Public Enemy and many other artists that help to bring social conscious issues. I love the work that rap does, and I'm humbled to be around you all because of the amazing work that you all do inside of marketing communities and telling stories that are sometimes overlooked. And to Carla, to, of course, Nicole, to Devin, and of course to you, John, thank you so much for having me. And off we go. Sounds good?
Our pleasure to have you. It's always great. The topics are always fantastic, and learn something new every day, and a good discussion. So thank you, and let her rip.
All right, here we go. So let's start here. Hopefully you all can see my screen that's here. And I decided to call this Reasoning with Renegades is because whenever we think about the term renegade, we think about someone who is against common rules, someone who does not, meet the status quo. Sometimes someone as a renegade are people that we throw away, things that we don't want, like a degenerate, defected, undesirable. And the truth of the matter is that though people come in many different styles or different manners, religions, sexes, we're all protected underneath this ideology that, we should be connected to the American dream. And that American dream says that I deserve certain rights. And we're going to talk about how a culture of America or a citizen of America fight for their rights inside this really unique conversation. All right. So let's go here. I want you to look at this image and I want you to tell me what you see. And you can join in the chat. Just tell me what you see. It's mysterious. What do you see inside of this image? Film noir. Oh, hello. I like that. Tell me what you see. I love that answer, Nick. Tell me, what do you see? As I tell my students, all and vintage fashion. Yep. All answers are great answers because they're coming from you. Just tell me what you see. Mystery. Yeah. Shadows. Love it. Anyone else? An old-timey dressed guy in an old-timey house. Okay. I like that. Jazz. Hello. The awesome jazz cover. 1950-ish man's going to work. I like this. A story to be told. Hello. Give me one more. Give me one more. A man lost in thoughts. John, what do you see?
The first thing that I felt was there's a tension in the image to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's the thing about this photo. It's just a normal stock photo that I found. It's not connected to anything, but it also shows us something that you can take one image And people can find many different ways of what they think this image means, right? So how about this? Let me look at one more image, all right? So tell me what you see. And all answers are great answers because once again, they come from you. Carla, you can't answer because that'd be cheating, and you know why. Tell me, what do you see? Vintage hair and makeup, a grainy photo of a woman from the past. Vintage hair and makeup at this time. Anyone else? Pin curls, hello. We're only seeing part of the photo. Yeah, that's true. A memory, nice. Give me one more. Anyone give me just one more?
I see a little angst or discomfort in it.
Little angst or discomfort. John, I'll take that. Well, this is not a stock photo. Believe it or not, this is a photo of a civil rights hero. This is the woman that many people believe is responsible for the Voting Rights Act being passed. Let me introduce you to Viola Louise, 39 years old, from Detroit, Michigan, and she drove from Detroit and she joined the Selma to Montgomery March. She left her husband and her 2 kids, and sadly, she was murdered on US 80 when leaving town by the Ku Klux Klan at that time. A lot of people believe that she's the catalyst of the reason why the Voting Rights Act happened, because they realized that if this white woman was willing to leave her family to fight for rights that she pretty much already had as a white American inside the United States, then it must mean something. And that's kind of weird and sad at the same time, but that's kind of what Viola's life was, a revelation of that all rights, civil rights are all rights. They just don't belong to one type of person. And she was definitely an ally. So then we go here, right? The civil rights movement is composed of many different parts. Now, mind you, we often focus on the Black keys. Why? Because there's a month and we focus on those keys a lot. But inside of even any piano chord that we play, we know that we play the Black keys, we play the white keys, and we're all trying to find civil rights inside this perfect chord to make this soundtrack of America make sense. So that's really what it's all about, is how do we get these chords to come together? That's why I really love this lecture, because it's about how these Black and white keys and these keys from over here that may come from different sexual orientations or different religious backgrounds or different ways of viewing the government, how they all finally play together and we have something wonderful. Our access to our world is easy, right? For those that are, well, not easy, but easy, provide some type of ease for those that deal with a disability. Whether you are blind, whether you're on a wheelchair, whether you are deaf, there are things to assist with how you navigate the world around you. What if I told you that before 1977, none of these things existed? That's right. Access was denied to any American that suffered from, or not suffered, but lived with a disability. For many people, it meant that you didn't have access to jobs. So you would try to apply for jobs, and jobs or businesses could turn you down because there was no clear pathway for you to maneuver around the office if you had a wheelchair. If you were blind, there was no access to an elevator because, yeah, you could walk on it, but there was no braille that was there to help you trace your finger to find out what was going on. Even down to housing programs, believe it or not. There were banks that denied loans to people that suffered from, or dealt with, should not say suffered, but live with disabilities because, well, you can't come into the bank. And because you can't come into the bank, you can't sign this paperwork. And we don't bring the paperwork out to you. You must be into the bank. So access denied. You can't go up these stairs to come to this interview. So access denied. Even to the fact of talking to one of my fraternity brothers who is wheelchair bound. He says that there was a time when he was turned down for jobs because he was viewed as a fire hazard because he was in a wheelchair. once again, access denied. This is really weird to me because once again, I've lived in a world where there's always been access for those that had disabilities. But this world that we're going to talk about is it's crazy. I'll even go one further for this. My father, when I was a kid, told me about a girl that he went to school with who was a dwarf, and she was brilliant, absolutely intelligent. But because the school district said that she was not the size of everyone else, they put her in classes with other people that had severe learning disabilities. So
Mhm.
all that talented was waste. Once again, access denied. So now we go here, right? September 26, 1973, after the complaining and pre-protest of Americans with disability, President Nixon signs the Section 504 Act. And inside the Section 504 Act, there had to be pathways of accessibility for those that were living with disabilities, i.e., the creation of ramps, braille used on public devices, redesigning of crosswalks, bumps that are on the edge of sidewalks, speaker systems put in so that our citizens that were deaf could hear the beeping that was there, even down to speed bumps as well. This was put into action by Nixon, and he signs this act. And John, that concludes our lecture. I wish it did. It doesn't.
Just beginning.
Just beginning. This act that was signed by Nixon sits on his desk for 4 years. That's right. And nothing happens with this. Nothing happens with this act at all. So these ramps don't get built. It's tied in all type of bureaucracy and red tape because no one knows how to build ramps. No one knows the cost of Braille. Well, who's going to put on the Braille? Well, how many buildings do we need to provide access to? I mean, what does this mean for the resigning of bathrooms? Do we need to build bigger classrooms? I mean, all of these things that came up, and they were nothing more than sideline excuses to provide access to Americans that were living with disabilities. And it's insane to think about this because it goes into this idea of why do we believe that America is only access for some but not for all, and that's the problem. So finally 1977 hits, and there's a man by the name of Joseph Califano, and Joseph Califano is the Department of Health. He's over the head of the Department of Health and Education and Welfare. His expertise and what Americans with disabilities are living with every day is very low. And his desire to complete this task is even lower. Because why? He's not interested in budgeting this out. He's trying to find red tape of how do we make sure that some get service and some doesn't. And even in one of his original proposals, tell me where this sounds weird. Maybe we can have one bank every 10 miles that has a ramp to it, and that will be the ramp that everyone that has a wheelchair uses. Yeah, every 10 miles. That was a proposed idea. Or that certain buildings that would be able to feature Braille and others would not be able to feature Braille. But we could kind of sprinkle it in every now and then. And that in a 25 to 30-year plan, that then all buildings would be up to code. What makes this even worse is that Joseph Califano did not even consider talking to Americans that were living with disabilities. What did they need? What would be the best process for you? But yet he found ways to create this red tape. And finally, people said enough was enough. So decision day came. And now we draw a line in the sand, right? So the American Coalition of Citizens for Disabilities insisted that regulations be put in place. And if they were not put in place by April 5th, they were going to act. And Joseph Califano kind of laughed them off. What can you all do? You all have disabilities. You can't push us to do anything. It will get done when it gets done. I also want to point this out too. Nixon's administration had left the White House. So it had fallen through the cracks of a whole administration and had now landed at the feet of the Carter administration, which Joseph Califano is a member of. And he's still like, no, I don't really want to do this because I don't know how to do this. And most importantly, I don't think it's that important. Absolutely insane. So there were claims that Califano made that he wanted to give out government contracts and that he was trying to do it at the cheapest cost possible. Yes, because everyone knows when you get something cheap, it's usually great. But this is something that he actually considered and said in a government document. And now we go here. So the protest begins all across the country. Various American coalitions, for Americans with disabilities, take into action. They protest in government buildings. They protest in Boston, Seattle, New York, Atlanta, Philly, Chicago, Dallas, San Francisco, Denver, and even here in Washington, D.C., where I'm at. And they took over government buildings and they blocked the ways of where government officials could maneuver and say that we can't, you think that we're causing you an inconvenience. Our life is an inconvenience because we don't have access to various things. And these protests across the country, they lasted 5 to 7 days. And the reason why they didn't last as long is because, unfortunately, many Americans that suffer of disability, they had to find ways to get proper health care. I need to get to my ventilator. I need to get to my decatheter. I need to get to some oxygen. I'm hungry. I don't have access to my medicine. And what really, and I can't say that word because it makes me mad. I'll use that. What really makes me mad about this is that the police purposely did horrible things to these Americans that had disabilities. They would loosen up the wheelchair locks, right? And roll them out of the building. They would misdirect people that were blind. They would put people that were deaf in uncomfortable circumstances. And they really tried to make them protest by humiliating them because of their disability. Let's stop there for a second. Living with a disability provides its own challenges, right? Mm-hmm. Now you're saying that I'm trying to tell you that I'm a human and I deserve human rights. And you dehumanize me by highlighting the thing that makes me not like everybody else. And this happened all across the country. And this is, and of course, a lot of people always say when I've done this lecture before, why don't we talk about this? Well, we don't talk about this because it's not America at its best. If you know anything about American history, we love to look like the hero. And anything that makes us look less than the hero in stories, especially if it's us doing other things to other Americans, we don't like those things. But hold on, there's one city that goes out of their way to hold fast due to a very supportive community, and that's the city of San Francisco. So San Francisco is able to hold fast inside of these protests. And
Hey, Dr. Clarkson, just a quick question. Sorry,
yeah.
You're quicker than I am. So in the previous that's obvious to everybody watching, but in the previous discussion around not wanting to do this, the red tape, the dehumanizing of it, can you expand on that? Is there a reason why? And I'll ask it because typically when people feel threatened or their way of life is changed or threatened by doing something new or something different, that's where you get a lot of resistance. This to me is just treating people as people, and by allowing accessibility and making the world available to these folks, it's not threatening, in my view, anybody else's way of life. So is there a little bit more on the resistance other than just being a jerk?
Well, yes, and right. Politicians move with their interests, right? many politicians of this era realize that Americans with disabilities don't have a pathway to vote clean. So
Mhm.
whether you are mad at me or not mad at me, you're not a deciding factor of if I get back into office. And that's really cruel when you think about it that way. But that was a driving force. Also, no one listens to you anyway. Um, we have, not all of us, but America has a bad way of pitying people with disabilities
Mm.
instead of sympathizing with them. And those are two different actions, right?
Yeah.
Pity someone, you believe that I'm better than you and I must lift you. Sympathizing with you says, I must lift you because this is the correct thing to do. And that's really probably the reason why it doesn't happen, because every mayor in these major cities knows that this is happening, but they're not quick to jump to close this gap. It's more so like, oh well. Now,
Yeah.
let me clean this up too. There were people who had disabilities before 1970 that were doing well with finding jobs, with being highly educated. You know, of course, that did happen, but usually these people had extreme financial resources. They came from families that had money, or they were just, and I hate to say it, blessed or lucky enough to kind of maneuver the world well enough to where they can happen, right? In fact, there's someone that we're going to talk about here soon that is a benefit, was able to do well, even though there are things put in her place, put in her way, though she lives with a disability. All right. So San Francisco's doing well, right? And they are able to survive this stand. And now we're talking about the longest sit in a government building happens in what is called the 504 sit-in, and it happens in San Francisco. Um, so this is Judy Human. I love me some Judy Human. So a lot of people really don't know who Judy Human is, but Judy Human is an activist and leads the charge in San Francisco. She's born in New York and she has a very unique story, right? She says that they had to sit in. And this is a sign that I have for you all. This was designed by Kevin Alfro, who was able to put this sign together, which became the calling card of the sign, the 504 Act now. She said that through the sit-in that she was able to turn them into less of an oppressed people, but an empowered people. And she said demonstrated to the entire nation that disabled people could take control over our own lives and take leadership in the struggle for equality. She said that the 504 Act made handicapped people crippled. That's some brilliant wordplay for you, right? She said that without the 504 Act, handicapped people became crippled. Take your time, look this up later. Handicap and cripple have two different definitions of it. But Judy Human meant this, and she led this charge. Now, once again, the police in San Francisco did many of of course, now police stations or police districts across the country are calling and telling San Francisco what you need to do. Hey, you need to unplug that oxygen machine. Hey, you need to take out their hearing aids. Hey, you know what? Take away their walking canes so that they can't tap and figure out where they are. You know what you should do? Just take their wheelchairs and push them out. They'll tire themselves out. They'll go away and you can do whatever you want to. However, what happens or who steps in? Connectivity. This is Brad Lomax. Brad Lomax is part of the protest that happens in San Francisco. And Brad Lomax is a member of the Black Panther Party. The Black Panther Party, I always say, inside of historical groups, gets this really bad rap of being violent, uber militant, non compliant. However, Head Start, right? Head Start's a program that was created by the government to help feed families, the lower income, and also provide education for those families as well too. That plan sounds brilliant. It was created originally by the Black Panther Party. That's right, it was. A lot of people don't know that the Black Panther Party created the Head Start program. It was a perfectly modeled program that the US government took right from the Black Panthers. How do you make sure that people that are working class, that don't have money to pay for daycare and feed their family, where can they go and get these things? And the Black Panther Party, through really smart economic spending, was able to clothe and feed a generation of people that literally the US government took that idea and called their own as Head Start. Brad Lomax and the Black Panther Party, of course, you see that Brad Lomax is wheelchair bound as well too. The Black Panther Party came in and really provided protection for the protesters against the police. They provided them with meals. They provided them with medical care. Once again, things we don't take consideration about Black Panthers. They're highly educated. A lot of them were inside the medical field. So they were able to provide medicine, be able to turn people on their wheelchairs to make sure that they did not get sores from sitting too long, refill oxygen machines, make sure that batteries and hearing aids were there, guide people to the bathroom, all those things that we don't really think about as a group of people that are living with disabilities trying to protest for their rights. And the Black Panther Party protected these people for 25 days. We don't talk about that in Black Panther history.
Most of what you just described is not
Yeah.
discussed in Black Panther history, quite frankly.
No, we don't. We label them as violent and they're throwing this and doing this, but yet here's a culture of people that have gone out of their way to realize that once again, these keys, these chords of democracy inside of civil rights must all be played together, right? So this is where the Black Panther Party started to set the tone. I'm lucky enough to have a fraternity brother who was a Black Panther during this time and sat inside of this protest. And he remembered, and one of the things he told me was that a white police officer walked up to him and said, "Why are y'all here? There's no Black people here. You all shouldn't even be here. You all are just looking for trouble." And I laugh and go, wow, what a horrible misunderstanding of civil rights. There's not enough Black people here for the Black Panthers to be here, so it cannot be a Black Panther issue. Civil rights are human rights, and all humans deserve rights. Civil rights are sometimes Black issues. They're sometimes white issues. They're sometimes LGBTQ issues. They, of course, are sometimes issues of people that are of different religion backgrounds. But at the end of the day, it is always an issue when people are not given their civil rights. That's what it's about. Whether whatever keys on the piano are hit, Dr. King, says an injustice for one is an injustice for all. And I absolutely believe that to be true. And that's why this picture means the world to me, because what you're seeing is that these are two people from two different backgrounds that are dealing with the same injustice. This has nothing to do with a Black issue, nothing to do with a white issue. This is a people issue, and these people are not being connected or woven into the fabric of democracy. So I wanted to end with this, and I thought this would be really interesting. I went on CBS's website, of course. No, I don't want that yet. I went on CBS's website and, of course, could not find this brilliant clip of all the action that happened during that time. And I wanted to be able to have you all look at this real quick. This video, here we go. Stop this real quick. This really great video of what happened that day. The clip I found, and inside of this clip, we should be able to go here. Hold on. And I should be able to do this. Give me 1 second, everyone. Does anyone have any questions? I always feel like I go on this tangent And I want to make sure that people have questions
No, I mean
along
it's
the way.
it's great when you were in the last slide. It's not really a question. I think it's more of a comment on kind of the last comment around human rights, right? Civil rights or human rights. I agree, and I think I'm not going to get it exact right, but if you think about disability in its broadest sense throughout anybody's lifetime, I think it's something like 70 or 80% of the population will experience some disability. So I think people think about
Right,
disability as this small niche group of people,
right,
and it's not. It cuts all boundaries, and most people themselves will either experience it or know somebody that experiences it. So I just think that's, to me, was interesting, and people don't think about it that way, you know?
right. When I first started doing research on this, I did not think about the levels of ways you would have to plan for a protest with people with disability. I just didn't think about those things. And I had to tuck in my privilege and go, yeah, you have to think about that. You have to think about healthcare and how do you manage these things that are happening with the human body. I didn't think about that. Um, Recently I participated in, March on Washington here in DC, celebrated the anniversary of it. And, it was just in water bottle and walk. But to
Yeah.
think about all these other things that are going on, that's where your privilege kind of has to be tucked in. You really have to admire how difficult it had to be to stand strong for 25 days inside
Yeah.
of a government building, knowing that people don't want you there because you make them feel uncomfortable. Let's get to the uncomfortableness of it. I'm going to play this video for us. All right.
For the times they are a-changing.
We were there because we had to be there.
We weren't going to take it anymore.
We had to have our civil rights.
And they decide to fight for them on April 5th, 1977. Proud and defiant, 500 to 600 people in wheelchairs with walking canes and hearing aids storm the regional office of Health, Education, and Welfare in San Francisco. Their purpose? To stop discrimination against the disabled, no matter what the consequences.
Our role that afternoon was to ask the people in the federal bureaucracy to call Washington and press for the signing of 504 as drafted.
For the disabled, the signing of Regulation 504 is the difference between living and existing.
We're more than handicapped without these laws. We're crippled.
504 means access to public transportation and public spaces. It means free public education and no job discrimination. All basic American civil rights, unless you're like Mary Jane Owen, who cannot see and cannot hear without an aid.
The general attitude was, you don't really know what's best for you, and we will do what is right over time. When? We're tired. When?
The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind.
For thousands of disabled people across the nation, the answer is now. In a grassroots movement, they stage a sit-in at 10 HEW offices across the country. In Washington, protesters put newly appointed Secretary Joseph Califano on the hot seat, demanding he sign 504.
I understand how you feel.
No, you don't.
Within 24 hours, the demonstrators are forced out of the federal buildings. Everywhere, that is, except San Francisco. Instead of giving in, they move in what will become the longest occupation of a federal building in U.S. history.
I had a moment of, do I really want to do this? I mean, I was thinking of, some of the things that had gone on in the 60s and the fire hoses and the mace cans, and I thought, well, it didn't have that kind of a feeling.
Nevertheless, officials try to sabotage the demonstration.
The biggest thing was that malicious unplugging of motorized wheelchairs at night.
Yeah. Those kinds of things did nothing but make us stronger.
We're speaking of something that goes beyond our bodies. Our priorities are not comfort. Our priorities are justice.
We shall not be moved.
The community rallies behind the demonstrators as the days pass. The Black Panthers send in cold sandwiches. Others bring in mattresses and a portable shower.
The restrooms here are far from accessible to disabled people. They have towel holders that you have to be Wilt Chamberlain to hit.
1 week.
And that is something also too inside that video that I want to highlight. The number of veterans that you see, and I see that Amy said it right here in the chat. You give your life for this country, and then you're being told there's no pathway to make you feel like a full citizen. I'm going to use a fictional parallel here, but it's going to make sense. If you've seen Forrest Gump, right, with Lieutenant Dan, Lieutenant Dan is a victim of 504 not being real. And Gary Sinise, who plays Lieutenant Dan, he does amazing work with disabled veterans. And he talks about that, learning the history of his character and why 504 not being in place is the reason why he's been so passionate about that nonprofit work of making sure that disabled Americans are able to have access to these things, right? I feel like the best way is to yield my time and give the last line to, of course, a really great person, and that would be Judy Heumann. And when Judy Heumann, of course, she unfortunately passed away this past March. She passed away a day after my birthday, March 4th, 2023. She talks about something really unique in regard to like her time living in New York. And I want to, of course, have you all listen to this and not that commercial because they didn't pay for ad space, about what it was like for her before. What was the world like before 504 was passed and put in place? All right, here we go. Let me go here and let's go here.
So I grew up in Brooklyn, all of you from Brooklyn, and at that time, so I was born in 1947. I had polio in 1949. There were no laws. There were no federal laws that made it illegal to discriminate against many people. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the Civil Rights Act in the U.S. didn't come about till 1964, and the disability community was not included in that. So my world was there were no motorized wheelchairs at that time because the technology wasn't there.
Right.
And so I lived in a neighborhood where there were small private homes, and I couldn't get across the street by myself because there was a step on either side.
Wow.
And still a problem today. Housing is not necessarily accessible. So you'll see in the book where I talk about going from my parents' house to my neighbor's house and having to scream into the house to ask my friend to come out and play. But as I got older, it became a bigger problem because the school in our neighborhood was not accessible. My mother took me to that school, PS 198. At that time, it wasn't accessible. After the laws came into being, in 1981, it was renovated, the school became accessible. But the principal denied me entrance into the school because I couldn't walk, and he said I could be a fire hazard. But said not to worry because the Board of Education would send a teacher to my house, which they did for a total of 2.5 hours a week for the first, second, third, and half of the fourth grade. So I think you can see that the landscape has changed in many ways. Movie theaters weren't accessible. I went to a Chinese restaurant once with a group of friends in wheelchairs, and the manager told us we had to leave. And that's when I get really fired up. So there really is, it kind of comes out of me, and I thought, we're not leaving, but I can't just kind of say, we're not leaving. So I said, call the police. And the guy was like, and I said, we're not leaving, call the police. And of course he didn't call the police.
Right.
And then we stayed there. But
and that's a really great interview. Of course, I don't want to spoil you all with that, but it's a really great interview as she's talking about her book, and the great work that she's done, and really kind of a telltale of her life. So let's get here. Am I here? Yeah, let's get here. All right. So this is where it gets interesting. Senator Alan Cranston calls a hearing. And inside this hearing, he's like, I need to know what's going on. Why are these people inside of these government buildings? Why are we on film abusing Americans with disabilities? Let's get to the end of it. And finally, they have this public hearing where they hear the complaints of disabled Americans in San Francisco, and Senator Alan Cranston is there. Senator Alan Cranston, he stands up and he says, hey, I know exactly how you feel. Once again, Judy Human said, you don't know how we feel, but I know that you can sign something to make Joseph Califano do his job. And that's all we want. We don't want you to sympathize with us. We want you to make him do his job. And on April 27th, 1977, Alan Cranston wrote this tear down of a letter. And you can look this letter up anytime you want to. And he politely tells them, and I'm going to highlight this section right here. He politely tells them in this last paragraph, don't you dare put any red tape in this to prevent these things from happening. And if you do, I want to be very clear what will happen to you next. And you notice who is CC'd at the bottom of this. President Jimmy Carter. And now that concludes everything. My name is Dr. Giani Clarkson. Thank you so much for your warm heart and your listening ears.
Awesome. Awesome as always. And I just think the one thing before we close, if people have to go, I understand, is as we think about what we do, right? I think there's the opportunity for, we have to be ADA, not have to be, we are ADA compliant in all the marketing communications that we do. And we want to make sure that we're representing, folks in our marketing communications. But some of the things that we have done, I want the folks on the audience here just remember to challenge our clients and think what our clients are doing. An example is one of our clients is Toyota and Lexus, and we did a research study on the car buying process for folks with disabilities. And what jumped out at us, it was called kind of the disability tax, right? It wasn't a monetary thing, but the effort and energy and all of the things that go into just the simple things of buying a car that normal people take for granted or non-disabled people take for granted. So we need to be thinking about, we're not going to re-engineer their cars, but we can certainly help them with the marketing communications and how someone goes through the car buying process. And I think there's an opportunity for us with all of our clients to challenge, what are they doing to make it accessible for everybody, and where's the friction in the process? So just kind of a call to the team to think about this a little bit differently than just let's show people in our marketing communications that are diverse from a disability perspective.
No, it is. I think that's kind of the story of it, is that, even when inside of commercials, do we see people with disabilities? We cannot pretend like they don't exist because we're denying them access. And, that's part of reason why, Judy and, Brad and everybody else did so well. I'm up here laughing because I see my full name in the chat, and that was a lot. That's if you want to know pressure is lecturing in front of the greatest historian of all time, being my father. So that's humbling to see.
Are there any questions before we close out for Dr. Clarkson?
Dr. C, that was amazing as always.
Thank you.
John, thank you for the call to action. I think it's a great one. We appreciate y'all. Dr. C, will we see you back in 2024?
I'm here for it. Let's get it. I'm really excited. I love the idea that we kicked around previously. Of course, you all can't get rid of me. I'm here forever now. But no, I'm always humbled by just the invite to be a part of this, and truly gracious. I just really appreciate you all. Thank you.
We appreciate you, Dr.
But-
C, and we will see you in February, hopefully.
Hey, sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you all so much.
Thank
Happy
you.
holidays.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye,
Happy
you too.
holidays.